Hi guys, we're back to reading Dealing with Dragons. We're on to chapter 9, in which Therendale is a dreadful nuisance and Cimorene casts a spell. The rest of the trip home was uneventful. Passing through the king's cave seemed easier going in the opposite direction, and the impenetrable darkness only descended once. As soon as they arrived, Kazul took the book that Morin had lent them and curled herself around a rock just outside the mouth of the cave to study it while Cimorene made dinner. She pored over the book all evening, and Cimorene found it fascinating to watch a dragon delicately turn the pages with her claws. Early the next day Kazul went off to consult with Roxem. Cimorene was rather stiff from all the dragon riding she'd done the previous day, so she decided not to do any more cleaning. Instead, she spent the morning in Kazul's treasure room, sorting through the most likely looking bottles and jars for those that might possibly contain the powdered hen's teeth. Remembering Kazul's advice, she started by setting aside all the bottles she could find that had lead stoppers. Since the light was not very good, she took the jars and bottles that looked as if they might be worth investigating and piled them in her apron, so as to carry them outside more easily. She had nearly finished sorting when she heard a voice calling faintly in the distance. "Bother," she said. "I did hope they'd leave me alone a little bit longer." She bundled up the last 5 bottles into her apron, and without looking at them, not forgetting to lock the door behind her, she hurried through the maze to see who was shouting at her this time. It was Therendale. "What are you doing here?" Cimorene said crossly. "I told you I wasn't going to be ready to be rescued for at least a month." "I was worried," Therendale said. "I heard you'd broken a leg, but you look fine to me." "Of course I haven't broken a leg," Cimorene said. "Where did you get that idea?" "Some knight at the inn in the foot of the mountain," Therendale replied. "He was up yesterday, talking to the princess he's trying to rescue, and he came back and wanted to warn everyone not to bother with the princess that was captured by the dragon Kazul. Well, I knew that was you, so I asked why, and he said his princess had told him that you'd broken your leg and wouldn't be able to walk for months." Cimorene smiled slightly. Alianora had apparently gone through with her plan to tell Helena about Cimorene's twisted ankle, and Helena had decided to improve the story a little in hopes of reducing the competition. "Somebody must have gotten it mixed up," Cimorene said gently. "You can stop worrying. I'm fine. Is that all you came for? These jars are getting heavy, and I've got to work." "Cimorene, we have to talk," Therendale said in a deep, heavy voice. "Then we'll have to do it while I work," Cimorene said. She turned on her heel and marched into the kitchen, full of annoyance. She had been feeling almost friendly towards Therendale. He had been worrying about her, after all, and he was only trying to do his best. That was until he decided he wanted to talk. Cimorene was quite sure that he wanted to talk about rescuing her, and she was annoyed with him for being so stupidly stubborn, and annoyed with herself for being annoyed when he was only trying to do what he knew. Therendale followed her into the kitchen. "What is all that?" he asked, as Cimorene put the apron full of jars on the kitchen table and began lining them up. "Some things I'm checking for Kazul," Cimorene said, and she picked up a small jar made of carved jade and pried the lid off. The jar was half full of green salve. Cimorene put the lid back on and set the jar aside. What was it you wanted to talk about?" she asked, reaching for another jar. "You, dragons, us." "That looks interesting. Can I help?" "As long as you don't break anything," Cimorene said. "Some of these are very fragile." Maybe opening jars would make him forget about "you, dragons, and us" for a little while. "I'll be careful," Therendale assured her. "This one looks like metal. I'll start with that, shall I?" He picked up one of the larger jars. It had been made of beaten copper, with 2 handles. He frowned at the top and then reached for his dagger. As he tilted the jar, Cimorene saw that the neck of the stopper was lead. "Not that one," she said quickly, and she didn't remember picking up that particular jar. It must have been one of the last 4 or 5 that she had scooped up when she heard Therendale calling. "Why not?" Therendale said, sounding rather hurt. "I said I'd be careful." The tip of his dagger was already embedded in the lead. "Kazul said to leave the ones with lead stoppers alone, so put it back." "If you insist," Therendale said, shrugging. He tried to pull out his dagger, but it was stuck fast in the lead. "Drat," he said, and twisted the handle. The dagger came free, but the lead stopper came along with it. I should have known, Cimorene said in a resigned tone. A black cloud of smoke poured out from the jar as Cimorene and Thorndale watched. It condensed into a dark-skinned giant, wearing only a turban and a loincloth. He was more than twice as tall as Thorndale, and the corners of his mouth were turned down in a stern frown. "What is it?" Thorndale whispered. "Trouble," said Cimorene. "Thou speakest truly, O daughter of wisdom," the giant said in a booming voice that filled the cave, "for I am a Jinn who was imprisoned in that jar, and I am the instrument of thy death and that of thy paramour." "My what?" Cimorene said, outraged. "Thy lover," the Jinn said, uncomfortably. "Thy man who stands beside thee." "I know what you meant," Cimorene said, "but he isn't my lover, or my fiancé, or my boyfriend, or anything, and I refuse to be killed with him." "But Cimorene, you know perfectly well," Thorndale started. "You hush," she said. "You've made enough mess already." "If he is not thy paramour, nor any of those other things, then what is he?" the Jinn said suspiciously. "A nuisance," Cimorene said succinctly. "Cimorene, you're not being very kind," Thorndale said. "What he is matters not," the Jinn said grandly, after a moment's heavy thought. "It is enough that and he shall die." "Enough for whom?" Cimorene said. The Jinn blinked at her. "For me. 'Tis my wish that thou and he shall die by my hand. Thou hast but to choose the manner of thy death." "Old age," Cimorene said promptly. "Mock me not. Thou and he shall die, and by my hand, ere this day draws to its close," the Jinn cried. "Do you suppose he means it?" Thorndale said nervously. "Why would he keep bellowing it at us if he didn't mean it?" Cimorene said. "Do be quiet, Thorndale." Thorndale lowered his voice. "Should I offer to fight him, do you think?" "Don't be silly," Cimorene said. She saw that Thorndale was distressed, so she added, "You came up here to fight a dragon. Nobody could reasonably expect you to challenge him." "If you say so," Thorndale said, looking relieved. Cimorene turned back to the Jinn, and saw that he too was looking perturbed. "What is the matter with you?" she said crossly. "Dost thou not wish to know why I will kill thee?" the Jinn said plaintively. "What difference does it make?" Cimorene said. "Yes, actually," Thorndale said at the exact same time. "Thorndale!" Cimorene said in exasperation. "Shut up!" "Hear my story, O luckless pair," the Jinn said with evident relief. "I am one of those Jinn who did rebel against the laws of our kind, and for my crimes I was sentenced to imprisonment in this bottle until the day that should come when human hands would loose me. As is the custom of my people, I swore that whoso should release me during the first 100 years of my imprisonment, I would make ruler of the earth. Whoso should release me during the second 100 years of my imprisonment, I should make rich beyond all dreams of men. Whoso should release me in the third year of my imprisonment, third 100th year of my imprisonment, I should grant 3 wishes. And whoso should release me after any longer span of time, I should grant only the choice of what death he should die." "You're gonna kill us because it's traditional?" Cimorene asked. "Yes," the Jinn said. His eyes slid away from Cimorene's. She frowned suddenly. "Just how long have you been in the jar?" she demanded. Well, actually," the Jinn's voice trailed off. "How long?" Cimorene insisted. 217 years, the Jinn admitted, "but nobody ever releases a Jinn before the 300 years are over." "You're trying to get around your oath," Thorndale said, plainly shocked by the very thought. "You pretended you have to kill us, so that way you wouldn't give us those wishes." "No," the Jinn said. "Thinkest thou that granting of wishes alone would trouble me so? Needs must I kill thee and thy fair companion, for I cannot return home and say that thou didst release me and I left 3 living. I would be a laughing stock. Never in 3,000 years has such a thing occurred." "Then you shouldn't have sworn the oath," Thorndale said sternly. "I had to," the Jinn said miserably. "It is the custom of our kind. 'Twould be improper," Cimorene finished. "'Twould be improper to do otherwise," The Jinn concurred, nodding. But thou hast found me out, and now what am I to do? If I kill thee, it will violate my oath. If I do not kill thee, the remainder of my life will be a torment. You could go back in the jar for another 83 years, Cimorene suggested. I could go back? The Jinn blinked at her for a moment. I could go back! I could go back! And in 83 years we'll both be dead of old age, Cimorene said. Since that was my choice of death, your oath will be fulfilled, and you can go straight home without killing anyone else or giving them any riches or power. Truly, thou art a jewel among women, and the very queen of wisdom's daughters. The Jinn said happily. Thou hast found the perfect solution to my difficulties. Wait a minute, Thorndale said. What about those wishes? Thorndale! Cimorene said in a shocked tone. I'm surprised at you. How can he give us wishes if he's going to go back in the jar for 83 years? It wouldn't be right at all. Thorndale frowned. Are you sure? After all, we did let him out during his 300 years. I suppose I could let thee have one wish at least, as a token of my thanks for thy help, the Jinn said, as long as thou dost not tell anyone. Wouldn't dream of it, Thorndale assured him, and my wish is to defeat a dragon and win his princess's hand in marriage. The Jinn waved a dark hand over Thorndale's head. There, when next thou dost fight a dragon, thou shalt surely defeat him. And thou, he said, turning to Cimorene. I could use some powdered hen's teeth, Cimorene said. The Jinn blinked in surprise, but waved his hand again, his face a mask of concentration, and then he bowed and handed Cimorene a fat brown jar. There is thy desire. Farewell, and with an elaborate salaam, the Jinn dissolved into a black cloud of smoke that poured into the copper jar from which it had come. Cimorene leaned over and plucked the lead stopper from the end of Thorndale's knife, and she jammed it back into place and heaved a sigh of relief. Thorndale was not paying attention. What did you want something like that for? He said, looking at the hen's teeth jar, with his nose wrinkled in distaste. I don't believe I shall tell you, Cimorene said, putting the jar carefully into one of her apron pockets. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with me? Thorndale said indignantly. I'm going to marry you just as soon as I beat that dragon of yours. I don't think you're going to beat Kazul, Cimorene said in a considering tone. But the Jinn just said. He said that if you fight a dragon, you'll defeat him. But Kazul is a her, not a him, Cimorene pointed out. And you ought not to be trying to rescue me anyways. Why not? Thorndale said. Because there are other princesses who've been captives of dragons for longer than I have, and they have seniority, Cimorene explained. Oh, Thorndale said, looking considerably taken aback. How do you know? They came to visit and told me all about it, Cimorene said. I think you should try for Caradwell. She's from the kingdom of Raxwell, and her hair is the color of sun-ripened wheat. My roommate just came in. Sorry. Let's get back to where we were. Her hair is the color of sun-ripened wheat, and she wears a gold crown set with diamonds. You ought to get along with her very well. Thorndale brightened perceptibly at this description, and then said, But everyone expects me to rescue you. As long as you defeat a dragon and rescue a princess, no one will care, Cimorene said firmly, and Caradwell will suit you much better than I would. Are you sure her dragon isn't female too? Positive, Cimorene said. Her cave is just 2 doors down and 3 over. If you follow the path outside, you can't miss it. He ought to be there now, and if you leave right away, you'll be able to get everything settled before dinner. All right, then, Thorndale said, as long as you're sure you don't mind. Not at all, Cimorene assured him fervently, and she walked him to the mouth of the cave and pointed towards Gornal's cave. And then she turned into the kitchen and gathered up the jars that she had been planning to check, except for the copper jar with the gin inside, and took them back into the treasure vault. She fetched an ink pot, a quill pen, and a sheet of paper from the library, and began writing out a warning to attach to the copper jar. She didn't want anyone else to open it up when the 83 years were over. Then the Jinn could go away without killing anyone. that's not right. She didn't want anyone else to open it up until the 83 years were over. Then the djinn could go home without killing anyone. She had just finished when she heard Alienora's voice calling at the rear of the cave. "I'm in the kitchen," she shouted. "Come back." "You're always in the kitchen," Alienora said when she poked her head in through the door a moment later. "Or the library. Don't you do anything but cook and read?" "Look at this, Alienora," Cimorene said, handing her the warning that she had been writing. "Do you think it's clear enough? Warning. This jar contains a djinn, who will kill you if you let him out too soon. Do not open until at least 105 years after the date that the citadel of the Yellow Giant was destroyed." Alienora read out loud. "Let's see. That's 84 years from now. Seems pretty clear to me. You'd have to be stupid to ignore a warning like that." "Maybe I ought to show it to Helena and see what she says," Cimorene said, frowning. "I wouldn't want anybody to get in trouble by accident just because I didn't make it plain." It's plain," Alienora said. "Cimorene, what on earth have you been doing here? And how do you know there's a djinn in this bottle?" "Therendale," Cimorene said, waving her hand expressively. "I was looking through some bottles from Kazula's treasure room to see if any of them happened to have hen's teeth in them, and then Therendale came in and wanted to help." "And he opened it?" Alienora said. "Oh dear." "Exactly," said Cimorene. "But it came out well in the end. I think I've gotten rid of him for good. I sent him off to rescue Caradwell." "You did? What if he doesn't beat Gornal?" "He'll win. The djinn gave him a wish, and he said he wished to defeat a dragon." Cimorene looked apologetically at Alienora. "I suppose I ought to have sent him to rescue you, but—" "It's quite all right," Alienora said hastily. "Getting rid of Caradwell will help a lot. And after everything you've told me about Therendale, I don't want to have him be the one to rescue me." "That's what I thought," Cimorene said. "Oh, and I got the djinn to give me some powdered hen's teeth, so we can finally try the fireproofing spell." "Good," said Alienora. "Let's do it right now." So Cimorene got out the spell and the ingredients that she had collected, and she and Alienora spent the next hours on various necessary versions of each preparation. First they had to boil some unicorn water and steep the dried wolfsbane in it. Next the mixture had to be strained and mixed with the hippopotamus oil and the powdered hen's teeth. Cimorene did most of that, while Alienora ground up the blue rose leaves and a piece of ebony. Grinding the ebony took a long time, but fortunately they didn't need much. When Alienora finally had enough, Cimorene mixed it in with the blue rose powder leaves and more of the unicorn water and one of Kazul's recently shed scales. Each mixture had to be stirred 3 times counterclockwise with a white eagle feather. Then Alienora dipped the point of the feather into her mixture and began drawing a star on the floor in the cave. "Is it going to be big enough for both of us?" she asked, scratching busily at the stone with the tip of the feather. "I think so," Cimorene asked. "Don't try to make it too big or you'll run out of liquid and we'll have to start all over." Alienora did not run out, though she thought she had used nearly all of her mixture by the time she was finished. "There." She sat back on her heels and studied the diagram to make sure there were no gaps, then set the dragon scale on the floor and the feather aside. "Your turn." "First we have to get into the center of the star," Cimorene reminded her. "Be careful not to smudge the lines." "Smudge them after all that work?" Alienora said, in tones of mock horror. She lifted her skirts and stepped carefully into the middle of the diagram. Cimorene followed, carrying a small mixing bowl full of half of something that looked like brown sludge, with a white eagle feather sticking out of one side. "It smells awful," Alienora said, grimacing. "Well, it doesn't matter what it smells like as long as the spell works," Cimorene said. "Ready?" "As ready as I'm going to be," Alienora replied, shutting her eyes and screwing up her face as if she expected to have a glass of cold water poured on her head. Cimorene plucked the eagle feather out of the bowl and raised it quickly over Alienora's head before it could drip onto the floor. She let 4 large drops of the brown gunk fall into Alienora's hair, and then brushed the feather across her forehead twice. She finished by drawing a circle with the feather on the palm of Alienora's left hand. "That tickles," Alienora complained. "Well, you can do it to me now," Cimorene said. Alienora took the bowl and the feather from Cimorene. "You're right," Cimorene said a moment later. "It does tickle." "Now what?" "Set the bowl down and shut your eyes," Cimorene instructed. When Alienora had done so, Cimorene closed her eyes and said, "Power of water, wind, and earth, turn back the fire to its birth. Raise the spell to shield the flame. by the power that we have tamed. Oh, Alienora said, that feels peculiar. Can I open my eyes now? Yes, Cimorene said, opening her own. We're finished. Did it work? Cimorene said, squinting. Did it work? Alienora asked, cautiously opening one eye and squinting at Cimorene. Well, something happened. We both felt it. Your hair and forehead don't have brown gunk on them anymore. Alienora promptly opened both eyes and studied Cimorene. Neither do yours. What does that mean? It means we go back into the kitchen and test it. She bent over, picking up the mixing bowl. We'll clean up later. Come on. That is the end of chapter 9. Next time we'll read chapter 10, in which Cimorene and Alienora conduct some tests and disturb a wizard. I hope you guys are liking this story. I know I'm enjoying reading it to you so much. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay happy and stay safe. Goodbye.